In the autumn of 1888, a shadow fell over London. It wasn't the fog, nor the choking coal smoke that clung to the city's lungs. This was a shadow with a name whispered in terror, a name that would be etched into the annals of crime forever. He came from the darkness, a phantom with a knife, and when he was done, he vanished, leaving behind only butchered bodies and a legend written in blood. This is the story of the man they called Jack the Ripper. To understand the Ripper, you first have to understand his hunting ground, Whitechapel, in London's East End. This wasn't the London of gentlemen in carriages. This was a labyrinth of desperation, a sprawling, overcrowded slum packed with over 1 million of the city's poorest souls. Here, life was cheap, and a bed for the night in a squalid lodging house could cost you every penny you had. The streets were narrow, unlit, and slick with filth. Gin palaces on every corner offered a fleeting escape from the crushing poverty, while crime and violence were a part of daily life. The police, understaffed and overwhelmed, did what they could, but this was a world that bred anonymity. It was a place where a person could easily disappear. It was in this chaotic, desperate environment that the women who would become his victims lived. They were not just statistics. They were mothers, daughters, and wives who had fallen on hard times. Many resorted to casual prostitution simply to earn enough for a meal or a bed. They lived on the very edge of society, vulnerable and unseen. And it was this vulnerability that the killer would exploit with terrifying precision. Who would notice one more unfortunate soul gone missing in a place that swallowed people whole? The terror began on August 31st, 1888. The body of Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly, was found in Bucks Row. She was 43 years old. At first, it seemed like just another tragic East End murder, but the doctors soon realized this was something different. Her throat had been slit with 2 deep cuts, and her abdomen bore gruesome, mutilating injuries. The savagery was shocking, but it was only a prelude. Just over a week later, the killer struck again. Annie Chapman, 47, was found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. The ferocity had escalated dramatically. Not only were her throat and abdomen mutilated, but her uterus had been surgically removed from her body. The killer had taken a trophy. Panic began to grip Whitechapel. This wasn't random violence. This was a monster at work, a predator with a chilling purpose. This escalation proved the police were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. How could someone commit such a barbaric act in a residential backyard and escape completely unseen? Then came the night of September 30th, the so-called double event. This was the night the killer became bolder, more brazen than ever. First, the body of Elizabeth Stride, a 44-year-old Swedish immigrant, was discovered in Dutfield's yard. Her throat was cut, but her body was otherwise untouched. The popular theory is that the killer was interrupted by a man entering the yard with his pony and cart, forcing him to flee. But his thirst for blood was not sated. Less than an hour later, and barely a mile away, the body of Catherine Edos was found in Mitre Square. The attack on her was one of frenzied brutality. Her face was horribly disfigured, her abdomen ripped open, and both her left kidney and a major part of her uterus had been removed. The killer, perhaps enraged at being interrupted before, had unleashed his full fury on Catherine. That same night, a crucial piece of evidence was found in a nearby doorway, a piece of Catherine Edos' blood-soaked apron. Above it, scrawled in chalk on the wall, were the words, "The Jewies are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, fearing the graffiti would incite anti-Semitic riots, ordered it to be washed away before it could even be photographed. A controversial decision that may have destroyed the killer's only message. The city was in the grip of hysteria, but the worst was yet to come. The final canonical victim was Mary Jane Kelly. She was younger, only 25, and considered more attractive than the others. Unlike them, she had a room of her own at 13 Miller's Court. It was here, on November 9th, that the Ripper would create his magnum opus of horror. When her landlord sent a man to collect the rent, he peered through the window and witnessed a scene of unimaginable carnage. The murder of Mary Jane Kelly was so savage, it defies description. Her body had been systematically eviscerated and dismembered, with her organs and pieces of her flesh draped around the room. Her face was hacked beyond all recognition. The killer had finally found the time and privacy he craved, and the result was an abattoir. After this final horrific act, the murders stopped. The shadow simply retreated back into the fog from which it came. The police were lost. They launched one of the biggest manhunts in London's history, interviewing thousands of people and following hundreds of leads, but they had nothing. Forensic science was in its infancy. There were no fingerprints, no DNA analysis. The killer left no clues, save for the mutilated bodies of his victims. But the killer did acquire a name, though not from the police. It came from a letter sent to the Central News Agency. Written in red ink, it taunted the authorities and was mockingly signed, Jack the Ripper. The press, sensing a story that would sell papers, published it. Almost overnight, the anonymous murderer became a celebrity, a terrifying boogeyman. Hundreds of copycat letters followed, but one stood out. It was delivered to George Lusk, the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Known as the From Hell letter, it was sent in a small box. Inside was half of a preserved human kidney. The letter's author claimed to have fried and eaten the other half. Some medical experts at the time believed the kidney could have belonged to Catherine Edos, whose own kidney had been taken. Was this a genuine letter from the killer? We will likely never know for sure, but it cemented the ghoulish legend of Jack the Ripper. The killer was gone, but the question remained: who was he? Over the last 130 years, more than 100 suspects have been named, creating a cottage industry for amateur and professional rippers. There was Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher whose body was found floating in the River Thames shortly after the final murder. His own family suspected he was the killer, but there's no direct evidence linking him to Whitechapel. There was Aaron Kazminski, a Polish-Jewish immigrant who worked as a hairdresser in Whitechapel. He suffered from severe mental illness, had a known hatred of women, and was institutionalized shortly after the murders ceased. Many senior police officials at the time considered him their prime suspect. In recent years, contested DNA evidence found on a shawl said to belong to Catherine Edos has been claimed to point to Kazminski, but the science remains highly controversial. And then there are the more outlandish theories. Was it a member of the royal family? A famous artist? A desperate midwife? The list is endless because the truth is, no one knows. Jack the Ripper was never caught. He was never brought to justice. He simply murdered 5 women, terrorized a city, and vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that is perhaps the most compelling in the history of crime. The Whitechapel murders were more than just a series of brutal crimes. They were a watershed moment. They exposed the horrific poverty lurking in the heart of the world's richest empire. The press coverage gave birth to a new kind of sensationalist journalism, and the police investigation, for all its failures, laid the groundwork for modern forensic techniques and criminal profiling. Jack the Ripper was, in many ways, the first modern serial killer. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a media phenomenon, a dark reflection of his times. His true identity is locked away by history, forever hidden in the fog-shrouded alleys of Victorian London. His name has become a synonym for unknowable evil. His crimes remind us that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are not fictional creations, but real people. And that sometimes, darkness can swallow a person whole, leaving nothing behind but a name and a blood-soaked question mark. The identity of Jack the Ripper remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Who do you think he was? Let us know your theory in the comments below.